Some secrets are whispered only among the trees. Some places choose their victims. Every summer, in a quiet little town, one child vanishes without a trace. Exactly 1 year later, they return, but they're never quite the same. This is a tale of sacrifice, of ancient forces hidden deep within the woods. A story best heard with the lights on. If you're fast enough to reach the switch, I present to you. Each summer, a child will disappear into the forest. Asterisk 3 years ago, Amelia awoke to find dozens of ticks attached to her body, crawling over her bedroom windowsills and through the floorboards just to get a small taste of her precious blood. That's how we knew my sister had been selected. She was ecstatic. Everyone was actually our classmates, our teachers, the mailman, our town's deacon, the kind Colombian woman who owned the grocery store. They were all elated by the news. Amelia's a great kid, a real fine specimen. Makes total sense to me, my grandpa remarked, his tone swollen with pride. Even our parents were excited, in spite of the fact that their only daughter would have to live alone in the woods for an entire year, doing God only knows to survive. The night of the summer solstice, Amelia would leave, and the previous year's selected would return, passing each other for a brief moment on the bridge that led from Camp Ehrlich to an isolated plateau of land known as Glass Harbor. You see, being selected was a great honor. It wasn't some overblown richest kid wins popularity contest either. There were no judges to bribe, no events to practice for, no lucky winners or shoo-ins for the esteemed position. Selection was pure because nature decided. You were chosen only on the grounds that you deserve the honor, an unbiased evaluation of your soul. Through and through, the town usually had a good idea who that person was by early June. Once nature decided, there was no avoiding their messengers. Amelia could have bathed in a river of insect repellent, and it wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference. The little bloodsuckers would have still been descending upon her in the hundreds, thirsty for the anointed crimson flowing through her veins. Every summer around the campfire, the counselors would close out their explanation of the selection process with a cryptic mantra. 17 words that have been practically branded on the inside of my skull. Given how much I heard them growing up, those who leave for Glass Harbor have perfect potential. Those who return a year later are perfect. Amelia was so happy. I vividly remember her grinning at me, warm green eyes burning with excitement. Although I smiled back at her, I found myself unable to share in the emotion. I desperately wanted to be excited for my sister. Maybe then I'd finally feel normal, I contemplated. Unfortunately, that excitement never arrived. No matter how much I learned about selection, no matter how many times the purpose of the ritual was explained, no matter how much it seemed to exhilarate and inspire everyone else, the tradition never sat right with me. Thinking about it always caused my guts to churn like I was seasick. I reached over the kitchen table, thumb and finger molded into a pincer. While Amelia gushed about the news, there had been a black and brown adult deer tick crawling across her cheek. The creature's movements were unsteady and languid, probably on account of it being partially engorged with her blood already. It creeped closer and closer to her upper lip. I didn't want the parasite to attach itself there, so I was looking to intervene. Right as I was about to pinch the tiny devil, my mother slapped me away. Hard, I yelped and pulled my hand back, hot tears welling under my eyes. When I peered up at her, she was standing aside the table with her face scrunched into a scowl, a plate of bacon in one hand and the other pointed at me in accusation. "Don't you dare, Thomas. We've taught you better." I understand feeling envious, but that's no excuse. I didn't bother explaining what I was actually feeling. Honestly, being skeptical of selection, even if that skepticism was born out of a protective instinct for my older sister, would have sent my mother into hysterics. It was safer for me to let her believe I was envious. Instead, I just nodded. Her scowl unfurled into a tenuous smile at the sight of my contrition. "Look at me, honey. You're special too, don't worry," she said. The announcement was sluggish and monotonous, like she was having a difficult time convincing herself of that fact. Let alone me. I struggled to maintain eye contact despite her request. My gaze kept drifting away. Nightmarish movement in the periphery stole my attention. As Mom was attempting to reassure me, I witnessed the tick squirm over the corner of Amelia's grin and disappear into her mouth. My sister didn't even seem to notice. Like I said, she was ecstatic. Every kid between the ages of 7 and 17 spent their summer at Camp Ehrlich. No exceptions. From what I remember, no one seemed to mind the inflexibility of that edict. Our town had a habit of churning out some pretty affluent people, and they'd often give back to the camp that gave them everything, with sizable grants and donations. Because of that, the campgrounds were both luxurious and immaculately maintained. 8 tennis courts, 2 baseball fields, a climbing wall, an archery range, indoor bunks with AC, a roller hockey rink, etc., etc., etc. I won't bore you with a comprehensive list of every ostentatious amenity. The point is, we all loved it. How could we not? I suppose that was the insidious trick that propped up the whole damn system. 95% of the time, Camp Ehrlich was great. It was like an amusement park, recreation center hybrid that was free for us to attend because it was a town requirement. A child's paradise hidden in the wilderness of northern Maine, mandated for use by the local government the other 5% of the time. However, they were indoctrinating us. It was a perfectly devious ratio. The vast majority of our days didn't involve discussing selection. They sprinkled it in gently. It was never heavy-handed, nor did it bleed into the unrelated activities. A weird assembly one week, a strange arts and crafts session the next. None of them taking us away from the day-to-day festivities long enough to draw our ire. A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. The key was they got to us young, before we could even understand what we were being subjected to. Their teaching started to make a perverse sort of sense. Selection is just an important tradition, a unique part of our town's history that other people may not understand, but that doesn't make it wrong. Every prom designates a king and queen, right? Most jobs have an employee of the month. The selected are no different. Special people with a special purpose on a very special day. The selected don't leave forever. No, they always come back to us, safe and sound. Better, actually. Think about all the grown-ups that were selected when they were kids and all. The important positions they hold now. Senators, scientists, lawyers, physicians, CEOs. Isn't our town just great? Aren't we all so happy? Shouldn't we want to spread that happiness across the world? That would be the neighborly thing to do, right? What a load of bullshit. Couldn't tell you exactly why I was born with an immunity to the propaganda. Certainly didn't inherit it from my parents. Didn't pick it up from any wavering friends. Either. There was just something unsettling about the selection ceremony. I always felt this invisible frequency vibrating through the atmosphere on the night of the summer solstice, a cosmic scream emanating from the land across the bridge, transmitting a blasphemous message that I could not seem to hide from. Selected endured unimaginable pain during their year on Glass Harbor. It changed them, and it wasn't for their benefit. It wasn't really for ours either. Okay, so tell me, who was the first selected? I demanded. The amphitheater went silent, and the camp counselor directing the assembly glared at me. Kids shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Amelia rested a pale, pleading hand on top of mine, her fingers dappled with an assortment of differently sized ticks, like she was flaunting a collection of oddly shaped rings. "Tom, please don't make a fuss," she whimpered. For better or worse, I ignored her. It was a week until the summer solstice, and I had become progressively more uncomfortable with the idea of losing my sister to Glass Harbor for an entire goddamn year. How do you mean? The counselor asked from the stage, rage sizzled over my chest like a grease burn. He knew what I was getting at. I mean, you're explaining it like there's always been a swap. One selected leaves Camp Ehrlich. One selected returns from Glass Harbor. But that can't have been the case with the first person. It doesn't make sense. There wouldn't have been anyone already on Glass Harbor to swap with. So my question is, who was the first selected? Who left Camp Ehrlich to live on Glass Harbor without the promise of being swapped out a year down the road? It was a reasonable question, but those sessions weren't intended to be a dialogue. I could practically feel everyone praying that I would just shut up, thought the counselor. A lanky, bohemian-looking man in his late 50s forced a smile onto his face and began reciting a contentless hodgepodge of buzzwords and platitudes. Well, Tom, selection is a tradition older than time. It's something we've always done, and something we'll always continue to do, because it's making the world a better place. You see, those who leave for Glass Harbor have perfect potential, and those who... I interrupted him. I couldn't stand to hear that classic tagline. Not again. Not while Amelia sat next to me, covered in parasites, nearly passing out from the constant exsanguination. You're not answering my question. But fine, if you don't like that one, here's a few others. How does selection make the world a better place? Why haven't we ever been told what the selected do on Glass Harbor? How do they change? Why don't the selected who return tell us anything about the experience? And for Christ's sake, how are we all comfortable letting this happen to our friends and family? I gestured towards Amelia, a pallid husk of the vibrant girl she used to be, slumped lifelessly in her chair. The counselor snapped his fingers and looked to someone at the very back of the amphitheater. Seconds later, I was violently yanked to my feet by a pair of men in their early 20s and dragged outside against my will. They didn't physically hurt me, but they did incarcerate me. I spent the next 7 days locked in one of the treatment rooms located in the camp's sick bay. Unfortunately, maybe intentionally, they placed me in a room on the 3rd floor, facing the south side of Camp Ehrlich. That meant I had an excellent view of the ritual grounds, an empty plot of land at the edge of camp. A cruel choice that only became crueler when the summer solstice finally rolled around as the sun fell. I paced around the room in the throes of a panic attack. I slammed my fists against the door, imploring them to let me out. I'm sorry for the way I behaved. Really, I wasn't thinking straight. I begged, just please let me see Amelia one last time before she goes. No response. There was no one present in the sick bay to hear my groveling. Everyone, the staff, the kids, the counselors, were all gathered on the ritual grounds. No less than 1,000 people singing, lighting candles, laughing, hugging, and dancing. I watched one of the elders trace the outline of Amelia's vasculature on her legs and arms in fine black ink, a ceremonial marking to empower the 16-year-old for the journey to come. I tried not to look, but I couldn't help myself. Crowd went eerily silent and averted their eyes from Amelia and the pathway that led out of Camp Ehrlich, as was tradition. For the first time in my life, I did not follow suit. My eyes remained pressed against the glass window, glued to my sister. She was clearly weak on her feet. She lumbered forward, stumbling multiple times as she pressed on, inching closer and closer to the forest. As instructed, she followed the light of the candles into a palisade of thick, ominous pine trees. Supposedly, the flickering lights would guide her to the bridge, and then Amelia was gone. Swallowed whole by the shadow-cast thicket, I never got to say goodbye. 30 minutes later, another figure appeared at the forest's edge. Damien, last year's selected, walked quietly into view. He then rang a tiny bell he'd been gifted before, leaving 365 days prior. That's all the counselors ever gave the selected. No food, no survival gear, no water. Just an antique handbell with a rusted, greenish bell bearing. The crowd erupted at the sound of his return. Once the festivities died down, they finally let me out of my cage. Over the next year, I continued to feel the repercussions of my outburst. When I arrived home from camp in the fall, my parents were livid. They had been thoroughly briefed on my descent. Dad screamed. Mom refused to say anything to me at all. Grandpa just held a look of profound sadness in his eyes, though. I'm not sure that was entirely because of his disappointment in me. I think he missed Amelia. God, I did too. None of my classmates are SVPD for my 14th birthday party. Not sure if their parents forbade them from attending, or if they themselves didn't want to be associated with a social pariah. Either way, the rejection was agonizing. For a while, I was broken. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. Didn't really think much. No, I simply carried my body from one place to another. Kept up appearances as best I could. Unilateral conformity seemed like the only route to avoiding more pain. One night, that all changed. I was cleaning out the space under my bed when I found it. The homemade booklet felt decidedly fragile in my hands. I sneezed from inhaling dust, and I nearly ended up snapping the thing in half. When Amelia and I were kids, back before I'd even been introduced to Camp Ehrlich, we used to make comics together. The one I cradled in my hands detailed a highly stylized account of how me and her had protected a helpless turtle from a shark attack at the beach. In the climatic panels, Amelia roundhouse kicked the creature's head while I grabbed the turtle and carried it to safety. Beautifully dumb and tragically nostalgic, that booklet reawakened me. She really was my best friend. At first. It was just sorrow. I hadn't felt any emotions in a long while, so even the cold embrace of melancholy was a relief. That sorrow didn't last, however. In the blink of an eye, it fell to the background, outshined by this blinding supernova of white-hot anger. I shot a hand deeper under the bed, procured my old little leak bat, gripped the handle tightly, and beat my mattress to a pulp. Battered the poor thing with wild abandon until my breathing turned ragged. The primordial catharsis felt amazing. Not only that, but I derived a bit of a wisdom from the tantrum. What I did wasn't too loud, and I expressed my discontent behind closed doors. A tactical release of rage in direct comparison to my outburst at Camp Ehrlich the summer before. Expressing my skepticism like that was short-sighted. It felt like the right thing to do, but God, was it loud. Not only that, but the display outed me as a non-believer, and what did I have to show for it? Nothing. Amelia still left for Glass Harbor, and none of my questions received answers. Because of course they didn't. The people who kept this machine running wouldn't be inclined to give out that information just because I asked with some anger stewing in my voice. If I wanted answers, I need to find them myself, and I'd need to do it quietly. 4 months later, I was back at Camp Ehrlich. Thankfully, the counselors hadn't decided to confine me as a prophylactic measure on the night of the solstice. I did a good job convincing them of my newfound obedience, so they allowed me to participate in the festivities. That year's selected was only 10 years old, a shy boy named Henry. I watched with a covert disgust as the counselors helped him take his iron pills every morning. Trying to counterbalance the anemic effects of his infestation, everyone bowed their heads and closed their eyes. As I listened to the sad sounds of Henry softly plodding into the forest, I reviewed what I'd learned about Glass Harbor through my research. Unfortunately, I hadn't found much. Maybe there wasn't much out there to find, or maybe I wasn't scouring the right corners of the internet. What I discovered was interesting, sure, but it didn't untangle the mystery by any stretch of the imagination either. Still, it had been better than finding nothing, and Amelia was due to return that night. I wanted to arm myself with as much knowledge as humanly possible before I saw her again. Glass Harbor was about 2 square miles of rough, uninhabited terrain. A plateau situated above a freshwater river running through a canyon hundreds of feet. Below, the only easy way onto the landmass was a wooden bridge built back in the 1950s. At one point, there had been plans to construct a water refinery on Glass Harbor. Multiple news outlets released front-page articles espousing how beneficial the project was going to be for the community, both from a financial and from a public health perspective. Clean water and fresh money for a better community. One of the titles read, all that hubbub, all that media coverage, and then nothing. Not a peep. No reports on how construction was progressing. No articles on the refinery's completion. For some reason, the project just vanished. It has to be related. I thought, the ticks draining blood, the idea of a water refinery, there's a connection there, a replacement of fluid, detoxification, or something. Truthfully, I was grasping at straws. Amelia will fill in the rest for me. I'm sure of it. I was so devastating naive back then. None of the selected ever talk about what transpires on Glass Harbor. It's considered very disrespectful to ask them about it too, but it's Amelia, I rationalized. She'll tell me. Of course she'll tell me. The somber chiming of a tiny handbell rang through the air. My head shot up, and there she was, standing. Tall on the edge of the forest. Amelia looked healthy, vital. Her skin was pest-free and no longer pale. She wasn't emaciated. Her body was lean and muscular. She was wearing the clothes that she left in, blue jeans and a black Mars Volta t-shirt. But they weren't dirty. No, they appeared pristine. There wasn't a single speck of dirt on her outfit. We all leapt to our feet, cheering. For a second, I felt normal, elated to have my sister back. But before I could truly revel in the celebration, a similar frequency assaulted my ears. That horrible cosmic scream. From the back of the crowd, I stared at my sister, wide-eyed. There was something wrong with her. I just knew it. Asterisk my attempts to badger Amelia into discussing her time on Glass Harbor proved fruitless. Over the following few weeks, I started off subtle. I hinted to her that I knew about the water refinery in passing, nudged her to corroborate the existence of that enigmatic building. You must have come across it, I whispered one night, waiting for her to respond from the top bunk of our private cabin. I know she heard me, but she pretended to be asleep. Adolescent passion is such a fickle thing. I was so headstrong initially, so confident that Amelia and I would crack the mysteries of selection wide open. But when she continued to stonewall me, my once voracious confidence was completely snuffed out. Emotionally exhausted and profoundly forlorn, I let it go. At the end of the day, Amelia did come back. Mostly. If I didn't think about it. I was often able to convince myself that she never left in the first place. On the surface, she acted like the sister I'd lost. Her smile was familiar, her mannerisms nearly identical, but she was different, even if it was subtle. An encounter I had with her early one August morning all but confirmed that fact. I woke up to the sounds of muffled retching coming from the bathroom, followed by whispering, and then again, retching. I creeped out of bed. Neon red digits on our cabin's alarm clock read 4:58 a.m. I tiptoed over to the bathroom door, careful to avoid the floorboards that I knew creaked under pressure. More retching, more whispering. I could tell it was Amelia's voice. For some inexplicable reason, though, the bathroom lights weren't flicked on. As gently as I could, I pushed the door open. My eyes scoured the darkness, searching for my sister. Given the retching, I expected to see her huddled up in front. of the toilet, but she wasn't there. Eventually, I landed on her silhouette. She was inside the shower with the sliding glass door closed, sitting on the floor with her back turned away from me. Honestly, I have a hard time recalling the exact order of what happened next. All I remember vividly is the intense terror that coursed through my body, heart thumping against my rib cage, cold sweat dripping down my feet and onto the tile floor, hands tremoring with a manic rhythm. Amelia, are you all right? I whimper Ed. The whispering and retching abruptly stopped, grabbed the handle and slid the glass door to the side. A musty odor exploded out from the confined space. It was earthy but also rotten smelling, like algae on the surface of a lake. My eyes immediately landed on the shower drain. There were a handful of small, coral-shaped tubes sprouting from the divots. Amelia was bent over the protrusions. She had her hands cupped beside them. An unidentifiable liquid dripped from the tubes into her hands. Once she had accumulated a few tablespoons of the substance, she brought her hands to her mouth and ferociously drank the offering. I gasped. Amelia slowly rotated her head towards me, coughing and gagging as she did. Her eyes were lifeless. Her expression was vacant and disconnected. In a raspy, waterlogged voice, she said, "It's such a heavy burden to carry the new blood, Tom." The previously inert tubes rapidly extended from the drain and shot towards me. I screamed. Or I thought about screaming. It all happened so quickly. Next, I remember, I woke up in bed. Amelia vehemently denied any of that happening. She insisted it was a bad dream. Eventually, I actively chose to believe her. It was just easier that way. From that summer on, Amelia's life got progressively better, and mine got progressively worse. She graduated valedictorian of her class, received a full ride to an Ivy League college with plans to study biochemistry. She's on track to becoming the next Surgeon General, my dad would say. Amelia had plenty of close friends to celebrate her continued achievements, as well. Me, on the other hand, barely made it through high school. No close friends to speak of, though I do have a steady girlfriend. We initially bonded over a shared hatred of selection. Over the last year, Hannah's been my rock. We've fantasied about exposing selection to the world at large, writing up and publishing our own personal accounts of the horrific practice, hoping to get the FBI involved or something. Recent events have forced our hand earlier than we would have liked. 3 weeks ago, Amelia died in a car crash. Her death sent shockwaves through our town's social infrastructure, but not just for the obvious reasons. Everyone's grieving, myself included, but it was something my dad whispered to my grandpa at her funeral that really got me concerned. None of the selected have ever died before. Not to my knowledge, at least. By definition, this shouldn't have happened. Does it break the deal? Does anyone know what to do about this? The more I reflected on it, the more I realized that my dad was right. I didn't personally know all of the recently selected. There's a lot of them, and they've scattered themselves throughout the world. But I'd never heard of any of them dying before. Not a single one. Don't worry, my grandpa replied. We can fix this. It won't be ideal, but it will work. This morning, I woke up before my alarm rang due to a peculiar sensation. A powerful need to itch the inside curve of my ear. My sleepy fingers traced the appendage until they stumbled upon a firm, pulsing boil that hadn't been there. The night before, a fully engorged deer tick was hooked into the flesh of my ear. I found 30 other ticks attached to my body in the bathroom this morning, on my palms, in my hair, over my back. This is only the beginning, too. The solstice is only 6 days away. Please help me. I don't want to change. I don't want to go to Glass Harbor. I don't want to carry the new blood.